Imagine for a moment someone who can see straight into your emotions, someone who can sense the tension in your voice, the shift in your energy, the subtle tremor behind your words. But this person doesn't just feel what others feel. They understand it, analyze it, and transform it into insight. They are not easily manipulated, nor blinded by empathy. They are the kind of empath that sees through illusion, a paradoxical combination of sensitivity and strategic intellect. The INTJ, INFJ mind. Think about that. The most dangerous empath is not the one who feels everything, but the one who understands everything they feel. A mind shaped by intuition and analysis, emotion and logic, light and shadow. A psychological alchemy described by Carl-Jung as the individuation process, the integration of our conscious and unconscious selves. In this video, we will explore how the empathic mind becomes truly powerful when guided by self-awareness and inner structure. We'll uncover how Jung's theories about archetypes, the shadow and the self, illuminate the complexity of empaths who think like strategists. And we'll reveal why this combination, emotional depth merged with intellectual precision, can make someone profoundly influential and sometimes even dangerous. But stay with me until the end, because the last revelation, the final key that unlocks the true power of the INTJ, INFJ empath, is the most important of all. It's something that can entirely change the way you see empathy, power, and even your own mind. Before we go deeper, take a moment to support this channel. Subscribe, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. What you're about to discover may change how you perceive yourself and others forever. Now let's begin this journey into the mind of the most dangerous empath through the eyes of Carl Jung. Carl Jung believed that every human being carries within them a vast inner world, a complex web of thoughts, emotions, archetypes, and unconscious motives. For him, true growth came from making the unconscious conscious, from facing what we deny or repress within ourselves. The empath with an INTJ, INFJ mind does exactly this, whether consciously or intuitively. They do not just feel, they analyze the feeling. They trace its roots, dissect its meaning, and extract wisdom from it. This is what makes them different. While many empaths drown in the emotions of others, the INTJ, INFJ empath studies them like an intricate pattern, observing and decoding. They use their intuition, what Jung called the function of perception through symbols and possibilities, to interpret what lies beneath the surface. Their empathy is not chaotic. It is deliberate, structured, and guided by insight. Jung once described the intuitive type as someone who perceives the possibilities inherent in a situation. The INFJ empath sees the emotional potential in every person, their fears, dreams, and inner wounds, while the INTJ aspect discerns the logical framework behind those emotions. Together they form a rare mind that not only feels deeply, but also strategizes compassion with precision. Imagine empathy as a double-edged sword. On one side, it connects you to the world. On the other, it exposes you to pain. Most people wield only one side. They either feel too much or detach too much. But the INTJ, INFJ empath sharpens both edges. They feel the emotional reality of others while maintaining the clarity to act decisively. Their intuition gives them foresight, an ability to predict emotional reactions before they occur, and their thinking function allows them to respond with purpose, not impulse. This fusion of deep empathy and analytical strength makes them incredibly perceptive. They can read emotional dynamics in social situations, anticipate conflicts, and influence outcomes, not out of manipulation, but because they understand the invisible architecture of human behavior. Jung might say they have achieved a rare harmony between feeling and thinking, between introversion and intuition. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. Jung taught that every strength carries a shadow, the unseen counterpart of our conscious identity. For the INTJ, INFJ empath, the shadow lies in the temptation to control rather than connect, to retreat into intellectual isolation rather than emotional authenticity. Their insight can make them powerful, but power without balance breeds disconnection. So the question arises, how does one remain an empath, open, genuine, and kind, while also being intellectually guarded and self-contained? How does one avoid falling into the trap of using empathy as a weapon rather than a bridge? Pause and reflect on that. Have you ever felt that your ability to understand others so deeply became both a gift and a burden? That your empathy, once pure, started feeling like a responsibility or even a threat to your peace of mind? Carl-Jung would argue that this tension is the essence of individuation, the lifelong journey to reconcile our opposites, light and dark, feeling and reason, vulnerability and strength. The most dangerous empath is not dangerous because they harm others, but because they cannot be deceived. Their empathy is intelligent, their intellect compassionate, and their awareness almost prophetic. And yet, this power doesn't come easily. It is forged through solitude, introspection, and the courage to face the shadow. The INTJ, INFJ empath often walks alone, not out of arrogance, but out of necessity. Their inner life is so rich that they need space to process it. They carry the weight of others' emotions, analyze them, and transform that energy into wisdom. But solitude is both their sanctuary and their challenge. In the next part, we will dive deeper into this solitude, why Jung saw isolation as a vital stage of self-realization, and how it shapes the empath's capacity for both understanding and strength. We will uncover how the INTJ-INFJ mind uses silence to master the chaos within, and why that silence might be the very thing that makes them so powerful. Carl Jung once said, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you." For the INTJ-INFJ empath, this loneliness is not a weakness. It is the crucible in which their power is formed. To imagine being someone who feels the undercurrent of every room, who absorbs the unspoken fears of others, and who silently carries emotions that are not their own. Over time, this kind of sensitivity can be exhausting, even paralyzing. And so the empath retreats, not because they dislike people, but because they need silence to filter what belongs to them from what belongs to the world. In that silence, something remarkable happens. The empath begins to see patterns, emotional blueprints that others overlook. They start to understand not only what people feel, but why they feel it. Jung would call this the awakening of the inner observer, the part of consciousness that steps back from identification and begins to watch. It is here that the empath transforms into something far more powerful, an emotional strategist. The INFJ side gives them profound emotional insight. They can sense when something is wrong before a word is spoken. The INTJ side provides structure and analysis. It dissects what the intuition perceives. Together, they create a mind that moves between feeling and reason with almost surgical precision. It's empathy reinforced by intellect, compassion guarded by wisdom. This is why people often describe INTJ, INFJ empaths as mysterious. They are calm under pressure, yet deeply feeling. They seem to predict what others will do, yet remain detached from chaos. Jung would see in them the manifestation of the self, the integration of all inner opposites, the balance between sensitivity and strength. But there is also a cost. Such people often live in a constant state of psychological tension, torn between wanting to connect and needing to protect themselves. They crave authenticity, yet find few who can meet them on that level. The world for them feels too loud, too superficial, too fast. So they withdraw not in defeat but in self-preservation. Have you ever noticed how the more you understand people, the harder it becomes to stay angry at them, and yet the harder it becomes to let them close? That is the paradox of the advanced empathic mind. Understanding human behavior on a deep level breeds compassion, but also caution. Once you see people's wounds, their patterns, their masks, you can never unsee them. Jung would argue that this stage marks the crossing from emotional naivety to psychological maturity. The empath is no longer the passive receiver of others' feelings. They are now the alchemist of those emotions, transforming chaos into understanding. They learn that empathy without boundaries is self-destruction, and logic without empathy is emptiness. The true power lies in merging both. This union of opposites is what Jung called individuation. It is the process through which a person becomes whole, not by rejecting their sensitivity, but by mastering it. The INTJ-INFJ empath does not repress emotion. They refine it. They no longer drown in others' pain. They study it, decode it, and learn from it. They see every emotional encounter as data, valuable information about the human psyche. That analytical empathy makes them both compassionate and calculating. They can comfort a friend while quietly mapping the underlying emotional dynamics. They can love deeply while maintaining emotional autonomy. To some, this seems cold. To Jung, it is the mark of someone who has faced their shadow. The shadow, in Jungian terms, is everything we deny in ourselves, our suppressed anger, pride, desire for control, or need for superiority. For the empath, the shadow often hides behind kindness. They may believe they must always heal others, always understand, always forgive. But when they begin to explore their own darkness, they discover a new kind of strength, one that does not come from pleasing others, but from knowing themselves. And this is where the danger begins. Once an empath becomes self-aware, once they stop being ruled by guilt or fear, they become unpredictable. They can no longer be manipulated through emotion. They understand projection, they recognize gaslighting, and they can sense deceit almost instantly. Their empathy becomes armor, not vulnerability. Imagine looking into someone's eyes and instantly feeling what they are trying to hide, not out of suspicion, but intuition. Imagine being able to discern whether a person's kindness is genuine or strategic, whether their pain is honest or performative. That is the world of the INTJ, INFJ empath. Their perception pierces through facades. They understand the architecture of the psyche because they have studied their own. This is what makes them so powerful, and in Jung's words, so dangerous. Not because they harm others, but because they cannot be easily deceived or controlled. They are guided by inner vision, not external validation. They do not seek approval because they already understand the psychological mechanisms behind it. They see the why behind every action. Such awareness brings both clarity and isolation. It's difficult to live in a world of masks when you see behind all of them, but that's precisely where Jung's wisdom offers a lifeline. The purpose of self-knowledge is not detachment, but integration. The goal is not to become superior to others, but to serve truth, to live authentically without illusion. So what does this mean for the modern empath who carries the mind of an INTJ or INFJ? It means that solitude, reflection, and self-mastery are not signs of weakness. They are the training ground for emotional intelligence of the highest order. The more they understand their inner world, the less power the outer world has over them. In the next part, we'll explore this transformation in depth, how the INTJ-INFJ empath turns pain into perception, rejection into wisdom, and intuition into strategy. We'll uncover the hidden stages of Jung's individuation process and how it awakens the archetype of the seer, the one who perceives truth beyond illusion. And most importantly, we'll reveal how this evolution can empower you to master your own empathy, transforming sensitivity into strength and awareness into freedom. Carl-Jung believed that transformation begins the moment we turn inward and face what we have long avoided. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. For the INTJ, INFJ empath, this turning inward is not a choice, it is a necessity. The noise of the external world becomes unbearable unless it is balanced by the quiet clarity of introspection. Within that inner silence, the empath begins the alchemical process of self-realization. They no longer absorb emotions unconsciously. They examine them with curiosity and precision. They start to ask, why did this feeling appear? What is it teaching me? Instead of being consumed by empathy, they become the conscious observer of it. And this shift changes everything. Imagine for a moment the empath as an emotional scientist, gathering data, identifying patterns, and transforming raw emotion into knowledge. This is where intuition meets intellect. The INFJ's deep emotional radar detects the unseen energies in people and situations, while the INTJ's analytical mind categorizes and structures those impressions into understanding. Together, they create something rare, emotional intelligence with direction. Jung would call this the awakening of the self, the central archetype that unites all aspects of our personality. It is here that the empath stops being merely reactive and becomes intentional. They no longer feel simply because they must, they feel because they choose to. Empathy ceases to be an uncontrolled flood and becomes a river with defined banks, still powerful, but now guided by awareness. And yet, this awareness comes with its trials. The more conscious one becomes, the more one sees, not only in others but in oneself. The empath who once believed they were only compassionate begins to recognize hidden motives, the desire to fix others to feel worthy, the tendency to absorb pain to avoid confrontation, the subtle pride in being the one who understands. Jung warned that self-knowledge is not comfortable. It shatters illusions, but only through that discomfort does real growth emerge. Have you ever noticed how understanding your own patterns changes how you perceive everyone else's? Suddenly, the manipulation you once tolerated becomes visible. The emotional games others play lose their power. The empath begins to detach, not from love, but from illusion. They no longer confuse empathy with submission. They begin to see that true compassion sometimes means saying no. This is where the INTJ, INFJ empath becomes truly formidable. Their emotional depth, now refined by clarity, gives them a calm strength that others feel but cannot explain. They can enter a chaotic situation and bring order simply through their presence. They do not need to dominate or control. Their awareness itself commands respect. Jung described such individuals as whole personalities. They have united their rational and irrational sides, their masculine and feminine energies, their shadow and light. They are no longer fragmented by inner conflict, and because they have met their own darkness, they can navigate the darkness of others without fear. Let's pause for a moment and consider something important. Empathy without boundaries is self-sacrifice, but empathy with understanding is transformation. The difference lies in consciousness. When the empath begins to see emotion not just as a feeling, but as a message, they move from being victims of sensitivity to masters of perception. Every emotion, joy, anger, sadness, or fear, becomes a clue pointing to a deeper truth. This is the hidden strength of the Jungian empath. They do not suppress emotion. They translate it. They realize that feelings are not enemies to be defeated, but messengers to be decoded. Jung once wrote that emotion is the chief source of consciousness. Without it, we remain asleep. With it, we awaken to the reality of who we are. But awakening also means seeing the shadows of others more clearly. The INTJ-INFJ empath begins to notice how often people project their unhealed parts outward, blaming others for what they cannot face in themselves. Jung called this projection of the shadow. When an empath becomes aware of it, they stop internalizing other people's pain. They begin to understand that not every emotion they sense is theirs to carry. This is the moment their empathy evolves into discernment. Think about it. Have you ever felt drained by someone's presence, only to realize later that their emotions had nothing to do with you? The evolved empath senses this instantly. They recognize projection for what it is, and rather than absorbing it, they reflect it back with silent understanding. That reflection is not cruelty, it is clarity. It forces others to face their own emotions rather than transferring them. Jung taught that this kind of awareness is rare because it demands courage. Most people run from their shadows. The INTJ, INFJ empath, however, turns toward it. They study it, confront it, and learn from it. They know that understanding darkness is the only way to remain pure in light. And so, they develop what Jung might have called psychological immunity. No longer swayed by guilt, manipulation, or emotional chaos, they stand rooted in self-knowledge. They know when to care and when to detach. They know when empathy heals and when it harms. They have achieved emotional sovereignty, the ability to feel everything without losing themselves in the process. But this mastery brings with it a deeper responsibility. Jung reminded us that power over oneself must always serve the good. The empath's insight can easily become a weapon, used to control, predict, or outthink others. The difference between a healer and a manipulator lies in intention. The dangerous empath must constantly choose integrity over control, truth over ego. When empathy is fused with moral clarity, it becomes wisdom. It becomes the ability to understand without judgment, to perceive without condemning, and to love without losing oneself. This is the level at which the INTJ-INFJ empath begins to embody the archetype of the sage, one who sees deeply but acts with restraint. In the next part, we will uncover how this final transformation unfolds, how the empath transcends their sensitivity and becomes a master of inner alchemy. We'll explore Jung's idea of individuation as a spiritual awakening, the point where empathy becomes enlightenment. And finally, will reveal the last and most powerful truth about why the most dangerous empath is not the one who feels the most, but the one who understands the meaning of feeling itself. Carl-Jung believed that the ultimate goal of human development was not happiness, but wholeness. To become whole is to bring light to every hidden part of ourselves, to integrate what we have feared, denied, or misunderstood. And for the INTJ, INFJ empath, this journey toward wholeness is both their greatest challenge and their greatest gift. They begin as the absorber, the silent witness to everyone else's pain. Then they evolve into the analyst, the observer who understands emotion through the lens of intellect. But their final transformation is something beyond both. It is not about emotion or logic, but about wisdom. They become the alchemist of consciousness, one who transforms empathy into insight and insight into enlightenment. This is what makes them the most dangerous kind of empath, not because they manipulate emotions, but because they transcend them. They understand emotions as signals from the deeper self, energies that, when interpreted correctly, reveal the hidden architecture of the psyche. They no longer ask, "Why do I feel this?" but rather, "What truth is this feeling revealing?" Think about that shift for a moment. When you stop reacting to your emotions and start listening to them, they become teachers. Fear teaches courage. Pain teaches boundaries. Sadness teaches depth. And love, real love, teaches freedom. This is the moment when empathy ceases to be a burden and becomes a form of intelligence. Jung described this state as individuation, the complete realization of the self. It is not perfection, it is integration. The INTJ, ENFJ empath, having faced their own shadow, now stands in harmony with both light and darkness. They no longer reject any part of themselves. They know that their sensitivity, once seen as weakness, was always the doorway to higher awareness. In this stage, the empath's perception becomes almost visionary. They see connections others miss, between emotion and truth, between action and intention, between the inner and the outer world. Their empathy becomes multidimensional, bridging psychology and spirituality. They sense not only what people feel, but what their souls are trying to express beneath those feelings. This is where Jung's teachings on archetypes become essential. Every human being, he said, carries within them the universal patterns of the collective unconscious, the hero, the shadow, the wise old man, the anima and animus, and countless others. The INTJ, INFJ empath learns to recognize these archetypes in daily life. They begin to see that people do not just act from personality, but from myth, repeating ancient stories of struggle, love, power, and transformation. Understanding this gives them immense clarity. They no longer take things personally because they see the archetype behind the action. When someone betrays them, they recognize the wounded shadow at play. When someone admires them, they see the projection of the hero. This awareness frees them from resentment, allowing them to move through life with compassion and detachment simultaneously. And yet, here lies the final paradox. Once the empath understands everything, they must choose what to do with that understanding. Knowledge without humility becomes arrogance. Insight without compassion becomes manipulation. Jung warned that the danger of the enlightened mind is inflation, the belief that one is above others. But the true master empath knows that power must bow to purpose. So what is the purpose of this kind of empathy? It is not to control, fix, or heal everyone. It is to illuminate truth, quietly, powerfully, without force. The dangerous empath becomes a mirror, reflecting truth back to the world without distortion. They do not seek to change people through persuasion, but through presence. Their clarity awakens clarity in others. Their calm disarms chaos. Their integrity inspires authenticity. Jung often spoke of the transcendent function, the point at which the tension of opposites gives birth to something entirely new. For the INTJ, INFJ empath, this transcendent state is reached when intellect and intuition merge, when reason serves emotion rather than suppresses it. The mind and heart stop competing and begin to collaborate. It is in this synthesis that true wisdom is born, and this brings us to the final and most powerful revelation of all, the secret that defines why the most dangerous empath is unlike any other. Their power is not in their ability to feel others, nor even in their ability to understand them. Their true power lies in their ability to remain themselves in the presence of anyone. Think about it. Most people lose themselves in the emotions of others. They absorb moods, fears, and desires until they forget who they are. But the evolved empath, the one Jung would call individuated, has anchored their identity so deeply in self-knowledge that no external emotion can pull them off center. They can step into the storm of another's chaos and remain still. That stillness is their strength, and it is what makes them untouchable. This inner stability gives them a kind of authority that cannot be faked. People feel it when they speak. They trust them, not because of charisma, but because of coherence. There is no contradiction between their words and their energy. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." The INTJ empath has earned that privilege through years of introspection, solitude, and inner battle. And perhaps that is the final lesson for all of us. Empathy, when mastered, is not about losing yourself in others. It is about understanding them without abandoning yourself. It is about holding your boundaries with love, seeing truth without judgment, and living in such alignment that your very presence heals confusion. The most dangerous empath is not a manipulator of emotions. They are a guardian of truth. Their empathy is not weakness but wisdom, a synthesis of intellect, intuition, and integrity. They have turned their sensitivity into sovereignty, their insight into illumination. So as you reflect on this, ask yourself, what would happen if you stopped apologizing for your sensitivity and started mastering it instead? What if you treated your empathy as the gift of awareness that it truly is? Remember, as Jung taught, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The most dangerous empath has made their unconscious conscious. They have reclaimed their power, their peace, and their purpose, and so can you. Thanks for looking.